of a Tucson local, Kurt Bullock, who I was in school with, etc. I actually figured out how to push us all into what now is very normal, these remote access servers. But I did that 15 years ago, basically in order to get us paperless, and in order to, one of our main concerns was literally just monsoons. We were tired of sending the whole staff home every time the power went out. And not being able to get anything done. And so we went to a full cloud architecture for backup reasons and security reasons and data continuity and data, just business interruption, anti-business interruption sort of risk management. And since then, we've just stayed on the cutting edge of what it is to build remote architecture for, for our company. So then over time, my friends started asking me, how are you doing it? Friends, other business owners started asking me how to do it. And eventually that led to me actually starting to do some formal coaching and consulting on systems and, systems architecture, CRM, remote work, telework, these types of things. And it's been kind of funny because the people that I, which page am I on? There we go. The people that I coach right now, it's been kind of interesting because a few weeks ago, I'm doing just sort of regular weekly check-ins, and they started asking me, oh, hey, we're seeing this thing coming down the pipe. What do we need to be doing to get ready for telework, get ready to send people home, et cetera? And I said, you're already set up for that. And they said, what do you mean? And I said, everything we've been doing, you may not have realized it, but you're all ready to go. And they're like, oh my gosh, we could send people home when I get off this call. And I said, yes. And so that's part of what I want to get to around by the end, is just how you go through this evolution. We're going to go through a bunch of specifics today, but overall, have you thinking about, am I evolving my systems to the cutting edge of what can be done in a modern environment for risk management purposes, exactly what we're dealing with right now? Am I set up so that just as a side benefit of my system strategy, I actually had telework already enabled? Or have you been, leaning back on older architecture and leaving things grandfathered in place that actually aren't getting you ready for what can be done kind of in this world? So that's why maybe you want to listen to me on these topics. So specifically, some things when I'm talking to coaching clients that I want people to be aware of is, we don't have effective deployment for CRM, lack of documented processes. And obviously right now, we don't understand how to go remote with our team. But again, like I was saying, the main issue there is that lack of unified and effective systems methodology, a lack of a way to do this. And so specifically today, we're going to be talking about the way to effectively enable remote work for your organizations. And I'll kind of skip through some of this. So specifically teleworking, I want to break this up two different ways: tools and tactics. All right. Tools are really your potential energy, right? And that's where I always try to talk to people. It's tools, software, different devices, etc. These are really just toys until they're embedded in a workflow that actually makes them effective. So the tactics, really your systems and your workflows, the way you work, is more how you realize, actualize, get kinetic energy out of the potential of those software and tools and devices that theoretically enable you to go remote, but you actually don't have the workflows in place to allow that. So we're going to talk about both sides of that. So first, the tools. So there's lots of stuff we could talk about today, but I'm going to focus in on just a few points, okay? The first thing is the go bag, okay? The bug out bag. So these are, if you know anything about this, this is, CIA agents and preppers and whatever, they have their go bag, right? This is your emergency supplies that if at a moment's notice, I need to bug out, I need to go, I've got my go bag, right? And so the question is, what's in the go bag for remote work if you have or have not enabled this yet? And there's really four major components. One, remote access points. If everybody's tied to their desk with these big hunking, kind of pillar, desktop computers, it's really hard to go remote. Everybody's either got to have a laptop or they've got to be able to use a work device or use a home personal device for work purposes. And that gets into bring your own device type policies that are a little bit more complex. But it really is why I encourage companies nowadays to use laptops. Get a big screen to plug into, whatnot, but give people portable devices. You can IP restrict them if you only want them to be able to be used at your actual office, but give people laptops so they can bring them into the conference room when you're having meetings. You can workshop together. And in the case like this, people can actually take their work to the coffee shop, take their work home. So they're not tied to that physical location. The second thing is a remote desktop app. Now, this isn't going to be really applicable to people who have systems kind of like we do, which are 100% cloud-based, right? If you've got a 100% cloud system, you don't have to worry about that remote desktop app. But if you're still tied to a server in the closet at an office, you're going to need to have remote desktop access, and you probably should be looking at a VPN, virtual private network, and we'll talk about that a little bit more later on under security. But that remote desktop app, I wouldn't get too fancy. Apple's got a native one, Microsoft's got a native one, Google's got a native one for Chrome. I would really, for the go bag, there might be reasons to use one of those other companies that offer this, but for the go bag, just go to the one that's native to the basic ecosystem that you have. Remote telephony breaks down a few different ways. Pretty much, this is going to have to do with whether you are on VoIP, voice over IP, or not. If you're on a VoIP system, you probably have app-based phones, computer-based, browser-based phones that you can actually roll out in a moment and have your phone system just like you were sitting at your desk. If you're on an old kind of CenturyLink hardline for your phones, you're going to have a little bit more difficulty. You might be able to forward, but probably that forwarding is going to be kind of to someone's cell phone or something. So that's not going to be great. So I would encourage people to get onto VoIP platforms as quickly as possible for that, in order to enable your phone calls to be taken wherever people happen to be working. The final one is your remote meetings, okay? And you're gonna have to have some sort of video platform, and I'll get into this in a little bit more later on. But again, for the go bag, for the bug out bag, what I would say is, if you're on Microsoft, use Teams. If you're on Google, use Google Meet, right? We could talk about Zoom. We will talk about Zoom, kind of next. Oh, actually, it is the next thing we're going to talk about. So why don't we just go there, right? So would you be shocked to hear that there are video conferencing platforms other than Zoom, right? A lot of people seem to be right now. The really important thing here is Zoom is we're on it right now, right? And it is so in the air, it's the thing, and everybody's used to it, etc. But we're getting to the point where people are getting which is maybe good for Zoom, I don't know. It's getting to the point where people are so used to this interface that they are starting to not tolerate tiny differences, okay? And so, for instance, a lot of these platforms won't easily show yourself. It's an annoyance to me when I use these other platforms. But the fact of the matter is, with what I do, I flip through all of these all the time. I'm on Zoom, or I'm on Google Meet, or I'm on Ring Central, or I'm on Teams, or I'm on WebEx. They're all roughly fine, okay? But the first big difference is, can you guys see my pointer okay? Yeah. So if you're on Google Meet or you're on Teams, you're already paid for. Those platforms are already paid for you. If you're on Ring Central, it's actually a white labeled version of Zoom. If you're on Ring Central and you're using Ring Central Meeting, again, you've already paid for a conferencing platform. One of the issues with Zoom that companies need to be aware of right now, when they might be using the free stuff and they're taking advantage of the fact that the 40-minute limit's been taken off of Zoom and whatever, is they might be getting kind of addicted to a platform that all of a sudden, when we come out of this and Zoom goes back to their normal pricing, all of a sudden you're going to be getting hit with an extra $15 a seat host fee for that platform, okay? When the fact of the matter is, if you're on G Suite or if you're on Office 365, you already have an extremely robust teleconferencing platform paid for, okay? Costs $12 a seat in both of these cases to have the full enterprise version of these platforms, and they've got teleconferencing built in. Am I telling you that there is zero difference between these two platforms? No. I am not telling you that there aren't people who should pay to have Zoom for certain reasons. But what I am telling you is way too many people are jumping on here versus getting used to using the stuff they're already paying for that's 98% going to take care of their needs, okay? So all I'm saying there is don't just hop onto Zoom because everybody's hopping onto Zoom. Just look at your stuff. In fact, in both of these cases, it's often easier for people to get into those systems the first time versus Zoom, which requires some extra downloads and some other things like that. I will also tell you, one of the things that commonly annoys me about Zoom is that they do not provide an easy sort of window to check yourself before it launches. And you actually got to dig into the settings to tell the system not to just throw your face up on the screen when you first launch the app, okay? That's bad. That's not a good part of their system. So don't think that everything's better at Zoom and nothing's better at somewhere else. There's differences across all of these. But when you've got something where you've already paid for the seat and it's already got something that probably handles 98%, just understand that before choosing to buy licenses with Zoom. It might not be necessary. It might be awesome, but it might not be necessary. So moving on from there, there's a few collaboration tools, other collaboration tools that aren't as obvious that I kind of want to talk to, that I always want to talk to people about. One thing that I encounter regularly, or that I encountered when I first started coaching, that I learned that I needed to point out, is when you are working remotely, it's a lot harder to show people how to do things, or it's not harder, it's just you have to show people how to do things in different ways, okay? And you've got to learn how to do screen captures, screen video capture, etc. And so, but what I discovered was I kind of assumed when I started coaching that when I started throwing up, Word docs and Google Docs, et cetera, and showing people how to do journaling and process documentation, et cetera, and I was throwing images of screens up and doing little annotations and whatever, I was assuming everybody knew how to do that. And it turns out that is not true, right? On your Apple, it's Control Command 4, right? To grab a screen capture. There's a lot of people that don't know that, right? And have never done it and don't know how to pull it up once they've done the capture, don't know how to annotate it. And if you are working remotely, you are going to have to provide instructions remotely. You're going to have process documentation that shows these screens that are annotated and give arrows and whatever. It's not very difficult technical skills, but what you will find is there's going to be that person who stayed quiet and just never told you that they didn't know how to do that. And if they can't do that, then they can't provide you the feedback. They don't know how to do the documentation, and you're going to have a sticking point for them working remotely and documenting what they're doing and documenting different things that you need. So screen capture is just one of these little weird things that I find that people don't notice. The next thing is contract management. There's a mix of this. Some people are on e-signature platforms like DocuSign, Zoho Sign, Hello Sign, Kuda Sign, these different things, and some aren't. If you are not, you got to be on that, because if you're still working on wet ink signatures, you're going to have a lot of pain trying to do remote work, trying to do telework. Again, DocuSign is sort of like Zoom is probably the platinum standard. It's what to look at in terms of what's the possible feature set, but in the end, it is the most expensive, and in most cases, it's not necessary. Zoho Sign, in fact, is just built into their CRM offering with Zoho One, so you can basically get it for free. But Kuda Sign, Hello Sign, these things are all a lot less expensive. I mean, you can be spending $50 a seat just for DocuSign sometimes, so you got to be careful about that. The other thing would be calendar tools in terms of collaboration stuff. And beyond just having a cloud calendar, right? So we want to be on Gmail or Outlook web app, whatever, so we can work remotely and have that. But beyond that, looking at things like Calendly, Zoho Bookings that allow you to build in algorithmic rules so that people can set meetings, they can see when you're available, they can book time with you, is really, really important. And that doesn't work the same way within just directly within G Suite, directly within Outlook, because yeah, that person's time might be available, but they may need you not to book it, right? They may have personal things scheduled for that time. They may have a work block scheduled for that time. Having something like Calendly or Zoho Bookings allows your users to tell you when they are available for those types of things, and sync multiple calendars when you can't just walk into their office and say, hey, are you available for a meeting tomorrow at 2? And they can kind of check it themselves. You can do it so that it's a little bit more automated. The other thing in terms of calendars, and this is a particular issue for us here in Arizona, is time zone. There's some time zone tools online that are really, really useful because, you know, I know we've got clients all over the country, and there's constantly this issue of, okay, the meeting's at 10. Okay, what is that on Eastern time? And are we on this side of the date line or that side of the, you know, daylight savings timeline? You know, where are we? And so time zone apps are actually really helpful for making sure that your calendars are all happening in sync and at the right time. The final thing that I would talk about here is digital desk space. When we were first trying to automate, go paperless, et cetera, way back in the day, you know, 15, 20 years ago, what we found was we deployed all of these applications that theoretically we didn't need paper anymore. We didn't need to print anything, whatever, but we still had these stacks of papers on people's desks, and everything was laid out, whatever. And we thought, I wonder why that is. And we started thinking, maybe we just haven't given them enough workspace, right? We were on these little low-res 15-inch screens. And so we thought, what if we gave them a second screen, right? Well, as soon as we gave them a second screen, those piles collapsed and the paper usage collapsed. We gave them a third screen and it basically disappeared. And what it turned out was we all actually do need a certain minimum amount of digital desk space, digital workspace to spread out. If you look at my computer right now, I've got my laptop going here, but I've also got all sorts of stuff. I've got the screen share going for the PowerPoint. I've got notes up. I've got some stuff about pricing and some different things like that going on. I couldn't do that on one little low-res 15-inch screen. Even the digital desk space we have has gotten so much better over the last 15, 20 years. We have multiple desktops within one little thing. So now you can get a lot out of that. However, when you go remote, how do we do that for teleworking? Well, I'm sitting here at my desk with my screen and a big, 27-inch, pluggable screen. But a lot of people struggle when they're on the road or just out of coffee shops or whatever they want to do, getting that little bit of extra digital desk space or a lot of extra digital desk space that they need. So I wanted to show you this. This is my actual remote rig. This is not what I'm on right now. I'm at my desktop rig right now. But these are two what are called ASUS Zen screens, okay? That drop down, and you can see this here. They drop down and they're about the size of a yellow pad, okay? So that's my laptop stand and two of these Zen screens. And so you can see I'm at full power user mode. Notice I can wrap these things up, stick them in a backpack and walk out. Okay. There's lots of these available, 150 bucks, 200 bucks a piece, something like that on Amazon. They are amazing tools for productivity on the go, is to have these extra screens. The one note that I would make on that to be careful about is just make sure that you're being careful about ports. These are both USB-C compatible screens because I'm on a USB-C compatible laptop, but you got to make sure that you have screens that plug in correctly to your system. So that's that. So tactics. Okay, so getting into some more of that's a bunch of the toys, right? So now let's get into some of the workflow type stuff. So the first thing is, again, there's a lot of stuff here. We're not going to be able to touch on all of it, but just getting a little bit focused in. The first thing that I want to bring up to you are your daily rituals, okay? Now, this might be office hours, this might be 9 to 5, whatever, but it doesn't have to be. But you do still need rituals. What are my starting rituals? What are my closing rituals? What hours am I going to keep? Is it one block of hours? Is it different types of hours? When we talk, if we have time to talk about synchronicity later on, what you'll find out is that lack of fixed, the office is open from here to here is actually a massive opportunity for productivity, because there's different people that are productive at different times, and allowing their rituals of work and their rhythm of work to flow to their most productive times can be a huge opportunity. But in the end, every single one of us has to establish these rituals of work. And a great way to start with that is to read this Atomic Habits book. And I will say that this actually, if you guys were getting the Seriously Pro version of this presentation, this is the second time I'm giving it, I would be doing it with Rachel, who's my wife and my co-owner with the agency, because you're seeing, I will try and point out when something's come up. Like, she reminded me, she's like, oh, you should show them a picture of, the multi-monitor rig, right? That's actually really powerful. People are like, oh, I could do that. I mean, I've told people that, and they're like, that changed my life. The portable monitor. I'm like, wow, who knew? But this was actually this was a book that both of us read. Actually, shout out to Matt Rosen at Burke Hall and Company, because he was actually the one that brought this to my attention. But one of the things that they talk about in Atomic Habits is that one good habit stacks to the next good habit, and the next good habit, and the next good habit. And what you'll find is that your days are better when you have this rhythm that you get into about how I lock into work for the day, right? How do I get started? What is my kick, right? What is my out of the block sprint, so that I get up to speed and get going for the day? How do I drop out of that? What's my closing ritual for the day? What are these hours that we're doing? And this is a great book that I would encourage you guys to read for, lots of reasons. But really, this idea of these opening and closing rituals that help you kind of build one good behavior on top of another, on top of another. Just a great, great place to start. The next thing that I would talk about beyond, the last thing I would just reiterate there is, these are your daily rituals. Feel free to go, Tim Ferriss actually has a great series on, the greatest morning rituals of people. I know that John Decker actually over on Tucson Business Opportunity Mastermind thing, he was talking about, morning rituals. Different people are going to have different stuff, but there's lots of good info out there if you're looking for, valuable ways to start your day and how to build that ritual for yourself. But it really needs to be your ritual. It's your way to jumpstart your day. So the next thing that I want to talk about is kind of a new professionalism, right? So I don't know how many of you may have seen this or not, and you may not be able to hear it. I'm having a problem with, oh, there we go. Well, shoot, I can't. There we go. Okay. So the reason I run this in the background, is everybody aware of the video that this is parodying? Have everybody seen that? There was a video of a gentleman who basically was on, international, business news TV, and his kid kept coming into the back of the room and, and running around and doing these different things. And then his wife's like, she's like off, she's like, poking her head in, trying to grab the kid and take him out and whatever. And this video is this brilliant parody of that web conferencing, work from home thing, right? Of somebody who is who just understands that there is stuff going on in life, okay? And that is going to be part of our lives. A week ago, like right now, okay, Carrie Stratford was presenting for this, right? And I don't know if anybody noticed, Rachel asked Carrie if she noticed, but I literally leaned in and gave Rachel a kiss while she was watching Carrie, not knowing that Rachel was on the call, was watching the call and was on video. And she said, well, Carrie said she didn't notice. I'm like, But Ray's like, but you were there. You were right there on camera, and I didn't notice that she was on the call, right? And so we're waiting for her to come in and do something, while I'm on the call. That's not obviously the most embarrassing thing that can happen, but we bob and we weave, and there's something about understanding that we are no longer in these absolutely, static, controlled environments of the office. That professionalism for work at home, remote, teleworking people includes being ready, showered, ready. We're on. We've got our, for one-on-one meetings, when you're on a webinar, not as much, but we're on. We've got our video on. We've got our audio on. We are here. We're prepared. We're clean. We're ready. And we've done everything we can within reason to avoid these interruptions, right? But that everybody understands that professionalism is more now about flowing through and doing your best within a space that could have interruptions, rather than, looking down on people for having, when they have something go wrong. It's more, how do you deal with it when something's going wrong? Another one was earlier this week. Literally, I had the Wi-Fi go out in my office. I had my Bluetooth go out on Zoom, and literally had the baby started screaming, and I was on a coaching call. And it was really funny because we had just started talking about certain practices that I train in my coaching and consulting that have to do with sort of meditative, back to the breathing, they have to do with journaling and kind of staying centered in the midst of the crazy. And all of a sudden, everything's going crazy for me, and I've got to sit there and stay on it and be with her and maintain some focus and be productive in the midst. And we both do, right? It's me and the client. We both have to kind of deal within this, craziness that we're swimming around in. So that to me is really, really important. The next thing that I would point out there is the team sport thing, right? Okay, kids, remember, don't bug mommy when she's in her remote working cubicle, right? I like to talk about this in terms of haunting your house to some degree, right? Is that it's kind of like being in the coffee shop, right? We're sitting there typing away, and there's people around us, and there's stuff going around and whatever. But when we're in the coffee shop, nobody's gonna, the baby's not gonna come tug on our sleeve and whatever. But we still are trying to get to that same sort of state of the world's happening around me, but I can drop in and be productive in the midst of the world running around, right? Jason had, dog running around earlier, right? And we've had that. I have a dog that barks at the front of the house, if I'm in there, right? I mean, Rachel sent me this picture, and I did get her approval before sharing this with this text. Literally, my life when I tried to go to the bathroom for 3 minutes, right? Like, again, this is shared with approval, right? So it is crazy, right? And so the thing that we want to really emphasize is this team sport. In order to be able to get to those places where you, your partner, whatever, can focus in these environments where there's interruptions and there's all these different things, is not only do we need to start by doing our best and showing that we've been professional and showing that we've done our best to be focused and be on task, but it also has to be this team sport. Everybody's got to be on board for, are you doing weekly calendar meetings with your family if you've got people at home? Are you really checking your own calendar? Are you making sure that you've done that? Are you supporting your partner, spouse, if you're married, if you've got kids? Are you making sure that your kids have stuff, so that if you need to deal with them and deal with the client, have you prepared the client, right? That, I got lots of clients nowadays where I just have to tell them, hey, this call has to happen during a time when I'm with my kids. And everybody's fine with that. It's just about being honest, setting the right expectations, and making sure everybody knows that we're in this together and we can do this together. So just remember that kind of team sport stuff. So next thing is the water cooler. Getting to that virtual water cooler sense. How do we maintain a sense of community, a sense of productivity, all of that amidst all this distance, right? So the first thing that I like to talk about here is actually just having some fun and being visible, right? Is having ways for your people to be visible. And on this call, we have the perfect example of this, right? Is Michael has been my, I was sitting there, I was like, okay, and I could do blah, blah. I'm like, oh, for this call, I know who my example of maintaining the water cooler is going to be, right? It's reaching out, having some fun, showing that you're ready for work, you're at work. You might be at home, but Michael, every time he posts these, what he is saying to the world is he's on the job right now, right? That's part of what he's doing here, is saying that he's on the job, whether you're checking in on Skype or on Slack, or you're checking in on Microsoft Teams, or you're posting something fun. Having these little, again, rituals for your team to be able to show some fun, show some, personality, and just basically check in and say, hey, I'm working, right? And this is how I'm showing that I'm working. The other thing that we want to maintain, again, along those rituals lines, are some regular touch points, right? Beyond these personal check-ins, we want to maintain some regular touch points. And I've got 4 that I generally recommend to people. You can do all of them, none of them, one of them, whatever. But daily stand-ups, hop in, 5 minutes, go, 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 go. What are you doing? What are you doing? What are you doing? Awesome. At the same time every day, give your people that moment of touch, right? Weekly check-ins. These are one-on-ones, right? You have delegates and subordinates, different people or people that are partnered. Have weekly check-ins, half hour, right? 15 minutes, half hour, when it's just you and them to do those weekly check-ins. Weekly lunch and learns, right? Just like this. Everybody get in, assign somebody a topic, and that's their topic to give for 30 minutes, 40 minutes, whatever it is, while people are having their lunch, and you can do that. And finally, monthly workshops. You cannot right now neglect the overall ongoing improvement of your company. You can't let that fall by the wayside. You can do 2-hour workshops productively within a virtual environment, within a teleconferencing environment. Everybody's got to be ready to work and maintain that. That's really, really important, that people are not letting their systems improvement, improving working on how we're working, not letting that go by the wayside through this. And finally, just that bigger working from home community, okay? Like this, right? This is a public thing. This is part of connecting to a larger working from home community that is so important. So, I will say one thing about managing to outputs, not time, is that it's a thing, because I want to get to some security stuff. We can loop back around to this in Q&A, what you have to do differently when you're working remote. And you can't be expecting to look over people's shoulders. You can't be expecting to judge their productivity by how much time they spend at the office. You got to have outputs, specific tasks. You got to see the production of their work. And you got to get better at that when you're doing teleworking. So again, if somebody's particular, this is something we can loop back around to in the Q&A. But I did want to get to security, because this is a thing that's different. Maybe it's not different, but it is something you should be thinking about all the time. Is everybody familiar with the idea of safer sex, right? Versus safe sex, we have safer sex, right? So it is my normal thing to go find a cartoon that's funny or something, whatever, to kind of illustrate the point and kind of, add some whatever. But when I went looking for cartoons related to safer sex, I found out nothing really was going to be appropriate for this environment. So you get the placeholder. But you get the idea, right? In your information technology and your business, this is what we're looking for, right? We're looking to make our digital spaces, our digital environments safer. We're not looking to make them safe, because you can't. What we're looking to do is make yourself a much harder target than otherwise you would have been, right? So how do we do that? Well, there's a few different things that we want to do here. And I'm going to, again, can't touch on everything, but I'm going to touch on just a handful here. The first thing is enhanced situational awareness. It was pretty funny when Rachel came out last week and started, waving at me from the back, back door. And I was on a call with a client, and I kind of muted it. And she's like, Taylor, you have no idea how loud you are. And you are telling this whole conversation is being overheard by the neighbors, right? And I'm like, oh, right? I'm no longer in my office, right? Because I'm at home and I work from home or whatever, but I'm walking out, but normally my neighbors aren't here, right? But now they're here. So, and I'm walking around in my backyard and whatever. And she had to remind me, right? I'm no longer in this, like, this is the geographic safe space that you use to do your work. We're now doing work from wherever, right? And I'm lucky enough that my wife is under the same sort of confidentiality agreements as I am from a work standpoint, that I actually can say things around her. But you all might be in a space where it used to be that home was a safe space from your work stuff that really weren't the same, right? You might have had confidentiality stuff at work that wasn't necessarily open, business at home, maybe, right? And now, let alone, like I said, all your neighbors are around, right? And walking around in the backyard trying to have a business conversation, who knows who's going to be, hearing that. So the point there is just, overall, you got to have a much tighter situational awareness when you're working remote versus in these little, safe spaces that we normally have. I mean, I've got a lot of Raytheon friends that still got to go in, because that is the only physical space in which they are allowed to do their work, is on that property, in that specific building, in that specific office. And so when we are out and about, we got to understand that we might not be under government, rules about where we can do our work and whatever, but we still have to have very high levels of situational awareness about what we're saying out into the air. The next thing is rights administration. Rights administration is actually the primary way you secure your data, okay? Because what this means is making sure that people that don't need to access things can't access things. So even if their password gets stolen or their login credentials get stolen, that they can't get to everything in your system because they didn't have it, right? And sometimes we think about these things in terms of, well, I don't need to restrict them over there. No, you should be thinking about this in terms of, do I need to give people access? Not, do I need to restrict them from access? Because that's how you keep your data secure, is by having a smaller group of people having that kind of universal super admin stuff. You need to have strong onboarding that goes to that. Who needs access to what? You need to have very good offboarding processes, particularly around your digital data. Did we make sure we got all of those usernames changed? Did we make sure that we had good logging on what was going in and out data-wise as that person was leaving leaving the company for whatever reason? And then the final thing there is just reducing sensitive information, right? If you can have QuickBooks run your payments versus collecting credit card info, awesome, do that. Wherever you can reduce the sensitive information that your business is collecting and handle that processing some other way, do that all over the place, okay? The next thing that I would bring up is regular updates. The number of times that I go in and see people with those red Chrome like update things, like flashing at them, like, you are so out of date, you are so out of date, right? Make sure you are up to date, because that's how the systems are getting patched against viruses, against bugs, against hackers, etc., is through those updates. Now, public Wi-Fi though, do not do updates over public Wi-Fi. Do updates to your system over private encrypted networks, okay? So just generally about public Wi-Fi, because the whole point is, the name of the presentation is work anywhere, right? So it's not work from your home over a VPN in a specific IP address, right? It's work anywhere, right? So the first thing is, stick to HTTPS and credentialed websites, right? Have cloud-based platforms where people can get in under tight encrypted security, logging into those platforms, and they've got full end-to-end encryption once they're in your different systems. Shut down, these are two that a lot of people don't notice. Shut down frictionless file sharing and shut down automatic connections when you're working on a work system out in the world. These are things like your AirDrop on Apple. So that's a good example of this, is making sure that kind of stuff is shut down just when, use it, but then turn it off, right? Use it and then turn it off. My PCs have a similar system. If you go into your network stuff, there's some sharing, there's some open sharing, file sharing settings that you can shut those things off. And then if something's needed, you just turn it on and you do the file sharing and turn it off. The problem is there's some exploits for those types of frictionless, file sharing and some of those automatic connection things. There's some hacker exploits that can be taken advantage of when you're just out in the world. Talked about not performing updates over public Wi-Fi. The last thing there is local network notes. Okay, if you are still a business who relies on server in the closet, which I generally would recommend, get away from that unless you have some specific reason to still be on a server in a closet. Get away from that, okay? Because all of this relates to cloud security. The only difference is, and VPNs even, like, those are great even if you're in the cloud because it provides you yet more end-to-end, even better end-to-end encryption for what's going on within your system. But if you're still using that network, server in a closet, you have to have remote access desktop, and you should be accessing that through a VPN. Okay, that's a virtual private network. You can go on Wired maintains a list of up-to-date, credible VPNs. Wirecutter.com maintains a really good list. Don't use just anybody because that's the whole point. They could be doing something shady. Go with something reputable, but you do need a VPN provider in order to securely access those systems. So some final notes. So one of the things that I would say is, if you've listened to this, you may have had a side thought that the stuff I'm talking about kind of isn't only unique to telework, right? It's kind of just best practices for the modern world. And that's correct, right? That if you think about what happens as our organizations grow, don't you just sort of naturally become more and more distant from individual team members? Don't layers of management start to intercede between the owner entrepreneur and new staff? Don't you have to manage, new and distant locations remotely, right? By the very nature of them being new and distant, right? So the biggest thing that I would say there is that everything we've talked about today is not unique to teleworking. It's just a selection of the measures that you need to be taking over time to make any growing enterprise successful, to make it robust, have better risk management, and be able to manage to metrics at, like I said, at a distance. It's true that in kind of small startup businesses, we have to fly by the seat of our pants sometimes. I certainly do myself. But if you take a little bit of time, week after week, month after month, maybe by next year, you'll be ready for the next COVID-19 thing that comes up. You'll be better prepared for the next thing that comes up, and just, be empowering your team to be more powerful and speedier and accelerate over time. And there's a quote from Kate Lister, who's a consultant recently in Vox, that kind of summed this up. In reality, whether you're 9 feet, 9 floors, or 9 miles away, you're probably communicating with colleagues remotely. The tools to make sure everyone succeeds are the same tools you need for working remotely. And that's really what I would leave you with, is that this isn't just about right now during COVID-19. This is about the systems and setups and workflows that you need to be successful in the 21st century. So with that, questions, thank you guys so much for having me. Hopefully there's been some valuable stuff.
Anybody have any questions for Taylor?
I don't have a question, Taylor, but I want to say great presentation. A lot of information shared that I think a lot of us just don't think about, or, this is all new, I think, to a lot of us. And I think moving forward, this is something that's going to be kind of part of the new norm. Even when we go back to the offices, a lot of this will still continue to be done remotely.
Yep, totally.
Always a good presentation, Taylor. We appreciate your time.
Yeah.
And
there is, Michael, did you have a question? Sorry, I saw you hop in.
Yeah, well, first off, thank you for using me as an example, maybe.
I get
God
what I
bless
can.
you, my friend. I guess, kind of getting to the last point that you made, and I'll have you do maybe a little bit of prognostication, but as you said, I think maybe younger generations or more, companies that are a little bit more entrepreneurial in nature have been gravitating toward this. Even, before COVID-19, do you now see that companies are going to utilize this more and more going into the future? And what do you think that sort of new normal looks like, since everyone now has more experience using these tools?
Yes, is the short answer. That a lot of the resistance to rolling this stuff out, exactly as you said, that's why younger kind of, companies, are more already, they were kind of like, when this came up, it's like, well, yeah, we were 100% remote to begin with, right? Zapier and others, right? It's like, yeah, we were already doing that. So, okay, cool. But yeah, I had a conversation with a guy, a couple weeks ago, 60s, whatever, and he's doing all of his meetings remote. He's like, I don't see myself driving downtown nearly as much anymore. He goes, I'm just not going to do it. He goes, I didn't realize how easy this was. Once you got over the initial hump, it was like, why, right? This is so much more efficient. I can go 1 minute from one meeting with a big group, a 1 hour, 2 hour workshop. The next minute I can be in the next meeting, right? And I can, or on to the next piece of work or whatever. It's like, I can set myself up, and this is not a younger guy. And really the insight there is that a lot of the resistance to doing more like this was just that nobody had ever forced these people to put the tools on their devices and use them regularly for a couple weeks. But it is shocking to me how it's literally within a couple weeks of just using it regularly. It's not months and months and years. It's just, they just hadn't ever been forced to do it. So they hadn't learned how to do it. And so, yeah, I do see, now I do think there's going to be, there's momentum, there's inertia, right? But I do think that we are going to see a sea change in companies going, oh, yeah, we can reallocate and do this. And you're going to see some stuff moving in different, different directions. I totally agree with that.
Any other questions, anybody?
I did have one thing. If not, feel free to jump in, whatever you want. I did have one thing that I was going to jump back to real quick, because I think this is really important and I didn't have time for it. Managing to outputs, not time. Okay. You can't do telework without understanding this. Okay. You cannot successfully do this without understanding how to stop managing to, did I watch them typing for 8 hours a day, 5 days a week, and start managing to productive outputs? And there's some things about that starting at the end, right? It's my job as the boss when I'm delegating is not first to actually show them all the little steps in doing it, but just to really give them a specified output and a don't do this, right? Don't do this thing that'll harm us, whatever, and get me this, right? The way that I like to, people think that's kind of opposite most of the time. When I talk to them about how should you delegate, how should you start writing instructions, they say, well, the first thing I do is write step one. And I'm like, nope, the first thing that you do is write exactly what you want to achieve with whatever you're delegating, okay? And that's the opposite, actually, of a lot of how people think. But the example that I like to use, particularly as we're thinking about telework, is the idea of delivering a package to an address, okay? Think of two different ways to delegate that task. One, I give you these detailed step-by-step, turn-by-turn directions, right? And you're going to take this and turn here and this and that and the other, okay? The other way is I say, deliver this to the front desk at this address, okay? Now, the first one is going to get you to follow a path exactly as I want you to follow it. But the second one is going to get me there because I'm just going to pull out my phone, open Google Maps, put in the address, and get myself there, right? And what happens when your instruction set goes wrong? What happens when it turns out Miller Avenue's under construction, or you forgot one step or something like that. And now all of a sudden the package doesn't get delivered at all, and they're coming back to you for more stuff. So when we're doing this, when you're thinking about delegating, first and foremost, you've got to be thinking about task completions, outputs, etc., versus thinking in these hours spent, right? Time tracking type of ways is the first thing in terms of telework. And second, when you're thinking about those tasks, think less about telling people how to do it and more about specifying what you need out of this at the end, okay? The follow-up to that is that second rule, seeking progress, not perfection, okay? Think about that person that you told them to go, drop off the package. You gave them the address. They got there. They're on property, but they can't quite find the suite, right? And now they call you. Well, okay, they ran into a stumbling block, but now they're going to call you. This is now the question they need is, hey, I'm here. I have the package. I'm on the property, but I can't figure out where to go. Oh, it's over there to the right off the lobby. Solved and done, okay? We're less worried about them doing it exactly the way that we might have done it than we are seeing that they're taking stuff off of our plates, okay? And really getting into that output. How the people that are on the call right now, I guess my question would be, how are you right now in terms of managing to outputs, right? Having these things really specified versus managing to, well, if we spend this much time on it, things seem to get done at the office. Because that's a question for you guys. How do people feel about, the specification of their process documentation goes to this as well. How many of you really have your business well documented? How you do things?
Yeah.
And that's just something Michael?
Well, I would just say, part of that is part of our learning curve too. And I think we have been, there's 13 of us, and I actually think that we've communicated more in the last 4 weeks, than we have in the last 4 months. And it's kind of like trial by fire. But, part of that is because our workload, I think, has actually increased just for the simple fact that we have a lot of businesses that we're having to work with, and we want to link them to the right programs and make sure that they are getting the help that they need. But, they're also, we came up with these daily knowledge at noons. So there's always that those ideas that are churning, but everyone's just very willing and ready just to say, okay, here's what we need to do. Here's some ideas. And we communicated about it really well. I think we still need to get to the point of what you're talking about, which is like even more adding more structure to, okay, it's great. We've communicated really well. We've come up with great ideas. We still need to take care of some things. So let's put some structure to that. And so I think that's going to be, our next step.
Matthew, did you come on to say something?
I was just thinking about, so each one of our projects are so different that we seldom have one method fits all, and we work hard to allow the freedom to be entrepreneurial and kind of customize to fit the customer's needs. And then this pandemic happened, and now we've had more rigidity and strict process. And it's been interesting watching everyone's kind of mindset shift. Safety is one thing that's always number one and paramount, and health. And now we have a new thing to guard against. And it's been interesting to watch a company that's always been very fluid and adaptable all of a sudden have to have a whole new set of parameters set up about all aspects of the business, not just being able to perform construction safely, but also go to more of a telework model at the same time.
Right.
And now we find ourselves with really detailed processes, when before we had very detailed intended outcomes and the process, and we kind of gave the freedom to adapt the process.
Right. Well, and I'm the last person that would ever tell you to get, you know, super specific documentation on something that doesn't need it. Right. It's like, if you don't know what that algorithm is to produce the output, then you don't know it. Or if there isn't one, right, then there isn't one, right? But where there is and where it's needed, it's really important, exactly like you were saying, to be able to pivot to, you know, leverage specific, you know, process information when you have it, right? Because we want to get more efficient and whatever. And again, very, very important when we're working at a distance that you can send somebody a delegation and know that there's a document that tells them how to do it, because you can't stand over their shoulder and show them how to do it anymore, right? And they might be working at hours that you're not working because they're, you know, particularly right now, right? The childcare stuff. It's like we're all managing around, or a lot of us are managing around these childcare schedules that have been kind of thrust upon us, right? And I can't guarantee that I'm available at the same time that this other person is. And so can we document things so that I can kind of fire and forget, right? I push them the task, it's properly documented, and I can go along my day being productive and know that they have what they need, again, kind of back to that second rule, to make progress or down under basic expectations, right? Do I know that they will do all that can be done because I'm not standing there watching them do the work, right? I know they're often in, you know, remote land, telework land, doing this. Can I trust them that they're doing all that can be done at that distance until the next time that we're set to check in, which could be tomorrow, it could be next week. Depends on how you guys have it set up. Could be tomorrow's, you know, daily stand-up. And that goes back to kind of those, what are those rituals that you guys have built in that even at a distance, you're still checking in on a daily basis, doing weekly workshops, doing weekly check-ins, you know, those types of things to make sure that we're not losing connection.
Great.
Well, thanks guys so much. I know we're right up on it, but thanks so much for having me.
You always do a great
Awesome,
job.
man.
We always appreciate it. So,
Thanks, Jason. Thanks.
and I also wanted to let everybody know that next on the 20th, next Monday, our next topic will be navigating mental health during this crazy, unprecedented time. We'll have Gwen Henderson from Buena Vista Health. So if you haven't registered, make sure you do that. And everybody have a great weekend. Matt, I owe you an email. I'll get back to you later on. I apologize. I've been busy. So I'll get with you this afternoon.
Have a good weekend.
All right. Give Rachel
Thank
my
you.
best, Taylor.
I will. Thanks.
Thanks. Take care.
Bye, Jason. Have a good weekend.
You too.